What's going on, gang? Welcome back to the channel. My name's CJ, and in today's video, we're going to be looking at all of the NFL Week 1 action for Sunday's NFL slate. I'm going to just go through, keep it real high level, look at some of the props that stood out to me in doing my research prior to hitting record on this video, and hopefully we land on some winning picks. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome. Do 3 things for me. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications by ringing that little bell icon, and drop a like on this video. Our last video, I set the goal of 20 likes. I took the over. You guys crushed it. You went over 35 likes in that video. I appreciate you so much. Let's see if we can do it again. I'm going to set today's like goal for 25 likes. I believe that we can definitely hit the over on that. So thank you so much for dropping a like on this video. Now, before we go any further, this video is about prop picks for the NFL, but mainly we're talking prize picks. Now, if you don't play on prize picks yet, it's a fantastic time to sign up. They're doing a 100% instant deposit match on your first deposit up to $100, meaning you put in $100, they're matching it, giving you another $100 to play with. You'll have $200 total to get you started for NFL season. All you have to do is use promo code Curry to take advantage of this offer. Now, something else that I'm doing is if you're signing up for Prize Picks for the very first time and you're using promo code Curry, I'm also going to give you the first month access to Patreon for free. Now, Patreon, in case you're unfamiliar with it, it's a way for you to support me as a content creator. I also like to give back by putting together helpful spreadsheets that saves you time. Takes some of the work, some of the guesswork out of doing your research and stuff like that. So it's my way of giving back to you. We have a full Discord community with a bunch of channels set up. We're not only talking NFL, we're talking WNBA, MMA, soccer, CSGO, all the sports on Prize Picks, basically. If you can play it, we're talking about it. So you sign up for Prize Picks using promo code Curry. You sign up for Patreon. I'll make sure that you get your first month of Patreon for free. So with that out of the way, the projections and the tools that I'm going to use this entire season are all powered by Derek Carty's The Blitz. Now, if you're not familiar with The Blitz, well, or you're not familiar with Derek Carty, well, it's the same guy who created the Bat, which is, in my opinion, and many other opinions, the very best projection system, the very best set of tools that you can possibly have for daily fantasy sports, whether it's baseball or football. Of course, we're talking football. This is a football video. The Blitz is going to be my go-to. So all of the picks that you see from this video, I've kind of handpicked and used the Blitz to help aid me in my research. So definitely check out the Blitz. You can go to rotogrinders.com. I'll leave a link down in the description of the video so you can go sign up for the Blitz as well and take full advantage of that. All right, so with that out of the way, let's head back to the Prize Picks board. First and foremost, the thing that I have to point out, if you have not heard yet, they are basically giving you a free square on Patrick Mahomes this week. They've got him at 0.5 passing yards, which means he just has to have 1 passing yard, go 1 or more passing yards, which for this guy, he's probably going to get 300 or more passing yards. Let's be honest, against this Cleveland Browns defense, I like this free square here. There's about 23 hours left to go. They've got a timer going right now, so definitely go take advantage of this Patrick Mahomes promo. It'll be going on through the next 24 hours until kickoff tomorrow, roughly. All right, so with that one out of the way, let's drill down through this board and start talking about some of these props that I like. The very first game on the board is the Philadelphia Eagles, my favorite team, if you couldn't tell, versus the Atlanta Falcons. We've got a battle of the birds to kick things off for NFL Week 1. So a couple of the props that I like here. The first one I want to talk about is under the receiving yards, and I'm talking about my man Diontae Smith. Just an overarching theme of today's video, you may notice that there's a lot of rookies in here, and I think that could be advantageous for us as Prize Picks players because you kind of don't know what's going to happen, right, with a lot of these rookies. You don't know if they're going to come out and have a breakout game, if they're going to have a dud and a quiet game their first game out there, but this could be an opportunity for us to take advantage of some of these spots. Now, Diontae Smith, he's pretty much slated as the #1 receiver on this Philadelphia Eagles team. And the good news for Diontae Smith and the Philadelphia Eagles is that the Atlanta Falcons secondary is not very good. They bleed passing yards and yards to opposing wide receivers. And we can take a look at ProFootballReference.com. And I've already got versus wide receivers, defense versus wide receivers last season. You could see that the Atlanta Falcons ranked #1 in yards allowed to opposing wide receivers, over 209 yards allowed. So that's why I'm liking Devontae Smith in this case. He's profiling as the #1 receiver for this Atlanta Falcons team, for this Philadelphia Eagles team. So I think the Devontae Smith at 43.5 receiving yards is a bit too low, and that's one that I am looking to target. Now on the other side of the ball, I like the Atlanta Falcons passing game here because I just think that with guys like Michael Davis in the backfield and who'd they sign? Wayne Gallman. They don't really have a lot of good running backs. So I'm looking to target some of the Atlanta Falcons passing attack. So one of the guys that I like is Kyle Pitts. Now, they've already bumped Kyle Pitts up to 49.5 receiving yards. I still think there's a good shot that he could go over and cover this 49.5 receiving yard prop. But the one that I'm really interested in right now is probably going to be Matt Ryan at 24.5 pass completions. Last season, he averaged over 25 completed passes per game. So I think in this situation, you could see a heavy passing attack with Arthur Smith in town now coaching the Atlanta Falcons. But let's be real. Overall, both sides of this game, a lot of question marks, new head coaches on both sides, a lot of new faces, new pieces. But I do expect that, one of the things that won't change is the fact that Matt Ryan is going to come out throwing the football. So I'm liking Matt Ryan over 24.5 pass completions. Now, next game up on my notes here is the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Buffalo Bills, two teams who are very stout defensively. So something's got to give, right? One of the props that caught my eye that I'm looking to possibly take the under on is Josh Allen. I know. Nobody feels safe. Nobody feels comfortable about taking unders on Josh Allen. But when he met the Pittsburgh Steelers last season, he did not have a very good game against them. I don't think he even eclipsed 250 passing yards here. Now, this number was at 280. They've bumped it up to 284.5, but that only makes me want to take the under even more. Pittsburgh is one of the top defenses in the NFL against the pass. We're going to go over here and look at ProFootballReference.com real quick and look at the passing yards allowed per game. And you can see Pittsburgh down here at 218.4 passing yards allowed versus quarterbacks last season. So many of their defensive starters have returned for the Pittsburgh Steelers, pretty much the same unit that we saw last year. So I'm liking them to limit Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen's going to have a little regression overall this season, and it's a tough matchup for him coming out of the gates against Pittsburgh. So I'm going to lean toward the under on Josh Allen in these 284.5 passing yards. Now, the other side of things, the prop that I like for the Pittsburgh side would probably be Najee Harris, who is at 59.5 rushing yards. And honestly, I'm surprised that this is stuck at 59.5 rushing yards. I kind of expected this one to start to rise a little bit. But this goes back to what I said earlier about Kyle Pitts, Devontae Smith. An opportunity for a rookie to come in and possibly make some noise in his first pro game. And we saw some very good signs of things to come, hopefully, from Najee Harris in the preseason. So I'm liking Najee Harris over 59.5 rushing yards. So that's going to wrap it up for that game. The next game up on the board is the Minnesota Vikings at the Cincinnati Bengals. And for this one, I'm going to go to the pass completion section, and I'm going to talk about Mr. Joe Burrow. Obviously, Joe Burrow coming off of a pretty catastrophic knee injury last season. Didn't really get any playing time in the preseason. Might come into this game with a little bit of rust to knock off. I could see them easing him back in, and one way that they could do that is by turning around and handing the ball off to Mr. Joe Mixon a whole bunch. So I could see this being more of a run-heavy approach here. Joe Burrow did attempt a ton of passes last season, so if Cincinnati does find themselves falling behind to Minnesota in this game, then it could turn into a Joe Burrow passes it for 30 completions or something like that. But in this case, this number seems a bit high here. Like I said, I think they take more of a conservative approach, try to ease Joe Burrow back in. So I'm looking to take the under on this 27.5 pass completion number for Joe Burrow. All right, on the other side of things here, I like this prop. Let's see if it's still up at what it was earlier. They may have bumped it. Nope, it's still holding strong, and we're talking about Dalvin Cook at 2.5 receptions. This is a number that I could definitely see him going for 3 or more catches against this Cincinnati Bengals team. Bengals, not very good defensively, didn't do a whole lot to get much better in the offseason, and Dalvin Cook is pretty much the bell cow for this Minnesota Vikings team. He's one of the last few remaining bell cow running backs in the NFL, so I could definitely see a couple of checkdowns, a couple of drop-offs to Dalvin Cook. You know, he crushed this and definitely got 3 or more receptions in quite a few games last year. So definitely do a little bit of research on it, but Dalvin Cook over 2.5 receptions is looking mighty fine if you ask me. So that takes us to the next game, which is the San Francisco 49ers at the Detroit Lions. And I saw a little bit of what I would call disrespect against the Detroit Lions in their passing game. Now, look, I'm not saying that they're going to be one of the top passing offenses or anything like that. Jared Goff, by now, we kind of get an idea of who he is as a quarterback. But, man, they had him at 224 passing yards. Where did he go? Where did he go? Did I pass him? Jared Goff. There he is. 224.5 passing yards against San Francisco. Now, that just seems incredibly too low. This seems like a position where Jared Goff could definitely eclipse this. 225 or more passing yards for Jared Goff is not out of the question. Let's go over and take a look at Pro Football Reference again. We'll take a look at San Francisco. They allowed 219.6 passing yards per game to opposing quarterbacks last season. So, I mean, he's going to be right there around 220 or more passing yards, in my opinion. I think that they fall behind a little bit to this San Francisco 49ers team, and Jared Goff will be in a situation where he's going to have to pass more than run. And I think this is an opportunity here to take an over on Mr. Jared Goff. The other one that I like is Jared Goff over 21 pass completions. So if you don't like the yardage for Jared Goff, maybe you take the over on his 21 completed passes. Again, I do think that this is a light projection for Jared Goff's completions and for his passing yards. So I'm looking to take the over on both of those props. One that I like from the San Francisco side is San Francisco's pass catcher, and we're talking receiving yards here for Mr. Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel looked like he was a little, we'll say, underweight with just 45.5 receiving yards up on the board. Deebo is healthy. Brandon Ayuk, I think, was a little bit beat up in the preseason, so I'm looking to attack this Detroit Lions secondary. Let's take a look and see how they fared against opposing wide receivers last year. And you can see that they gave up over 205 yards per game to opposing wide receivers. So Jimmy G and company could come out firing. They could take advantage of this soft matchup against Detroit, who wasn't very good in any facet of defense last season. So I'm liking Deebo Samuel to get at least 46 receiving yards in this particular case here. All right, which takes us to the next game. We're talking Arizona Cardinals at Tennessee Titans. And the one that caught my eye here was actually a veteran, former Bengal. Now he is in Arizona, if you haven't been keeping up with the news. And that's AJ Green, who's at 34.5 receiving yards. Now this seems just way too low, in my opinion, for a team that's going to be a pass-first team with Kyler Murray at the helm. Of course, you've got other weapons like the rookie Rondale Moore, and we can't forget DeAndre Hopkins, but we're talking AJ Green here at 35 or more receiving yards. It just seems like a bargain, like a steal for me. So I'm looking to take the over on AJ Green here. Another prop from this game that caught my attention was Ryan Tannehill, over 245.5 passing yards. So let's go all the way back up to the top here. Let's find Mr. Tanny. And you can see at 245.5 passing yards, that number is still good. If the Tennessee Titans find themselves falling behind, I do like Tannehill to go over 245.5 passing yards. Let's go ahead and take a look at where Arizona ranked against the pass last season. Middle of the pack, they gave up 246 passing yards per game to opposing quarterbacks. So I could see this one being a good spot to take the over on Ryan Tannehill if Arizona does turn this into a shootout. So I like that one. The other one that I liked from this game was Julio Jones, 62.5 receiving yards. I think that number is looking a little bit light. Let's close this out here. We'll go to receiving yards. Julio Jones, let's see if he's still up at 62.5. This board is so big. They've got so many props right now. 62.5 is still good for Julio Jones. So this could be one where it takes a little bit of time to develop, but Arizona, not very good. Patrick Peterson no longer in the picture for the Arizona Cardinals. So I am liking Julio Jones here against this Arizona Cardinals secondary. Let's take a look at how many passing yards to opposing wide receivers that they gave up last season on average. We'll go down to Arizona, kind of a middle of the pack team, 156.5 receiving yards per game given up to opposing wide receivers. So I could definitely see Julio Jones coming out and making an impact. I mean, he could get this in just one catch. Let's just face it, he's a deep threat, and I think he's still got a lot to prove. All right, so with that one out of the way, let's go ahead and move things over to the Seattle Seahawks versus the Indianapolis Colts. There's a few props here that caught my eye. The first one is going to be a rushing yard prop, and although a lot of the props that I've been taking in this video have been overs, this one's going to be an under. So let's move it on down here. We're going to talk Chris Carson at 57.5 rushing yards. Seems a little bit too high against a pretty tough Indianapolis Colts run defense. Let's take a look at how Indianapolis did against the run last season. So we sort things out here. We go and we find the Colts, and they're all the way down here, allowing just 73.1 rushing yards per game. So they were the third toughest against opposing running backs. So that is why I am liking Chris Carson under here. Plus, I think that with Xavier Rhodes being out for the Colts, that this could be a situation where Russell Wilson gets to cook, and this is a more of a pass-heavy approach here from the Seattle Seahawks. So with that prop out of the way, the other prop that I really liked is on the Colts side, and I'm talking about Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor receiving yards, more specifically. He was at 11.5. Let's see if this number is still good. It is, and the Seahawks weren't very good against opposing running backs last season. So let's go take a look and see how many receiving yards per game that they give up to opposing running backs. And you can find all this on ProFootballReference.com. So we'll go ahead and scroll down to the Seattle Seahawks, and you can see one of the most giving to opposing running backs in terms of receiving yards. 40.4 receiving yards per game. So a couple drop-offs to Jonathan Taylor, and I think this one is a lock. I mean, at 11.5 receiving yards, that's pretty easy. And I expect Carson Wentz to probably have a more conservative play call in terms of how the Colts will coach on the offensive side in this game. I don't expect this to be one of these games where they're going to let Wentz air it out. I could see a lot of check downs, a lot of short, safe routes, intermediate length routes. So I'm looking to definitely take the over on Jonathan Taylor in this case. Another one that caught my eye, I won't get too far into it, Paris Campbell and Michael Pittman over receiving yards. They all seemed pretty light, pretty underweight. And another one was Gerald Everett's receiving yards at 25.5. So Campbell, 28.5, Pittman, 48.5, and Gerald Everett, 25.5. I think all of those make for good overplays. So let's move it over to the next game, the New York Jets at the Carolina Panthers. Of course, this is going to be kind of a revenge game for Sam Darnold versus his former team, the New York Jets. So in this one, the rushing props didn't really catch my eye all that much. There was one that stood out to me, and it was Mr. Michael Carter of the New York Jets, who's at just 15.5 rushing yards. Of course, he's got Tevin Coleman in front of him, but Michael Carter here at 15.5 rushing yards seems a little light. I think this is one where if they give him a fair amount of carries, let's say 10 carries, he could definitely go over 15.5 rushing yards. So that's one that I'm looking to potentially target out of this game. Another one would be Zach Wilson. His passing yards seemed a little bit too high for a rookie. I think that they try to lean more on the run game and less on the pass game in his first live action in week 1. So I'm looking to probably take the over here on Zach Wilson at 242.5 passing yards. On the Carolina side of things, there was one that caught my eye, and that was their top wide receiver. Well, he's the top in my opinion. You could also make a case for Robbie Anderson, but I'm talking about Mr. DJ Moore. DJ Moore looked like a steal at just 58.5. Let me find him here because, golly, this board is just monstrous. Okay, Carolina. Bear with me, folks. Bear with me. We're doing this live. 58.5 receiving yards. It's still good. So the New York Jets, not very good against the pass last year, if I remember correctly. Let's take a look here at Pro Football Reference. New York Jets. Yeah, not very good. 174.4 receiving yards allowed per game to opposing wide receivers. So 174.4, that puts them in kind of the bottom half of the league in terms of most generous defenses against the pass. So I'm liking the over on DJ Moore here. He very regularly went for 59 or more receiving yards. I expect Sam Darnold to get every opportunity to air it out, to prove something against his former team. And what better than one of his top receiving targets in DJ Moore. So I'm looking to definitely take the over on that one. With DJ Moore out of the way, let's see who we have next. And for that game, we're going to go to the Los Angeles Chargers at the Washington football team. And the first one that I like that kind of caught my eye, it's going to be kind of a weird one because you don't think of him really as a scrambling type of QB, but he can definitely do so. And I'm talking about Fitzmagic. Ryan Fitzpatrick at 10.5 rushing yards. I like the over in this one. I think this could be a situation where he scrambles once or twice and gets over this 10.5 rushing yard prop pretty easy. Let's take a look at how the Los Angeles Chargers fared against opposing quarterbacks and how many rushing yards they allowed per game. So we go find the Chargers. You could see they're one of the more giving teams in terms of allowing rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks. 21.4 rushing yards per game allowed to opposing signal callers. So this could be one where Ryan Fitzpatrick sees the Red Seas part and just runs right up the middle and picks up, 10.5 or more rushing yards on just one scramble. So I'm liking that one. The other one that stood out to me was Mike Williams of the Los Angeles Chargers. His receiving numbers seemed far too low, in my opinion. He's at 37.5 receiving yards. I think that one is one that I'm looking to target the over on. So let's take a look at how Washington did against opposing wide receivers. We'll sort by yardage here. We'll go find the Washington football team. Now, they have a pretty good defense here at 145.1 receiving yards allowed per game to opposing wide receivers. Could be tough. It could be tough, but that number is just so weak for Mike Williams. I mean, 1, 2, 3 catches, and he's over, 37.5. So I'm liking the over on that particular prop. And the next game I want to talk about is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans. Look, both of these teams are pretty bad, but I do think that we have some opportunities here, especially on the passing side of things for the Houston Texans. Tyrod Taylor is going to be the starting quarterback. No Deshaun Watson. He's been ruled inactive for week 1. So I'm looking to take advantage here of Tyrod Taylor, who is a veteran, which is kind of why I'm thinking this number is a little bit too low at 206.5 passing yards. Jacksonville was not very good against the opposing quarterbacks last year and against the pass. Let's take a look at their defensive stats. And you can see Jacksonville ranks in the top 10 in terms of how many passing yards they allowed last season at 270.1 passing yards per game. So I do think this is an opportunity for Tyrod Taylor to go over not only his passing yards, but also his passes completed. And if you look at the amount of completions the Jags allowed last season, 23.1 per game. Tyrod Taylor's projection for completed passes, I think, is pretty doggone low. Let's go take a look at it real quick. Yep, 18.5. So he just needs 19 completed passes to go over this. So if you don't like the passing yards as much, maybe you go with the passing completions. But either way, I do think there's some opportunity here for value in taking the over on Tyrod Taylor. On the other side of things, we've got Laviska Shenault Jr., and I like him to go over 46.5 receiving yards. Let's see if that number is still good or if they bumped it up. But it looked like an opportunity for us to take an over here. There's so many props on this board. Got to scroll all the way through them and find who we're looking for here. But 46.5 receiving yards against the Houston Texans. Houston, not very good defensively. Let's go take a look at last year's numbers and how many receiving yards to opposing wide receivers they allowed per game. You can see that they ranked in the top 10 here, 171.7 receiving yards allowed per game. And I don't think they got a whole lot better on defense from what I can recall. So I'm looking to go at them with this Laviska Shenault receiving yards prop here. So with that one out of the way, let's move to the next one. The next game is the Cleveland Browns at the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, this one kind of interesting. Once again, we're going to go back to the quarterback rushing yards. I took the over on Dak Prescott the other night, and it ended up working out in my favor. So I want to go back to rushing yards, and I want to look at Patrick Mahomes, who is at 11.5 rushing yards. I think this is one that is kind of a sneaky prop that maybe people are overlooking, but this is a number where Patrick Mahomes has went 12 or more rushing yards in quite a few games, more than you would expect. And I hope that his foot or whatever it was that was ailing him in the Super Bowl is completely healed now. If it is, I could definitely see him getting loose for a couple of scrambles. You know how he likes to do. He's always a threat on the feet. So with that one out of the way, let's move over to the other side of things. And I'm talking Baker Mayfield. Now, Baker Mayfield at 251.5 passing yards seems entirely too low. I do expect Kansas City to put a lot of pressure on this Cleveland Browns offense, and in that case, Baker Mayfield would have to throw the football a whole lot. So 252 or more passing yards is completely doable in my opinion. I expect them to possibly abandon the run here against Kansas City if they do fall behind. So, tying into that theme or that game script, you might want to play some Kareem Hunt maybe over receiving yards. I could see that playing out because obviously Kareem Hunt's more the pass catcher out of the two running backs for this Cleveland Browns team. So definitely could see Kareem Hunt going over his receiving yards prop if we ever find it here. He's at 15.5. Seems pretty easy, pretty doable if Cleveland does find themselves in a pass-first situation, maybe in the second half. The other one that kind of stood out to me was Mecole Hardman, 37 or more receiving yards, and you know that this guy is a deep play threat. So all it takes is one bomb for Patrick Mahomes to Mecole Hardman, and he's absolutely crushing 36.5 receiving yards. So that's another one to kind of keep your eye on. Saw some good edges in our advantage there. The next game, the Miami Dolphins at the New England Patriots. We've got Diontae Parker. He kind of stood out to me, both for his receptions, which were at 3.5, and we're going to look at his receiving yards real quick. Let's find him. He's at 44.5. I had him projected to go over 44.5 receiving yards according to the Blitz. Again, my projection tool of choice all season long for all your NFL needs. Definitely go check out the Blitz if you haven't yet, but that was one that I'm looking to take the over on. The other guy that I wanted to look at taking the over on was Jonnu Smith. I think they bring in Jonnu Smith, they bring in Hunter Henry, and that kind of lets you know that they're looking to provide some safety valves for Mac Jones, their rookie quarterback. Of course, they cut Cam Newton, so I could see some check downs, some short to intermediate passes to guys like Jonnu Smith or possibly Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry's been a little bit banged up, so I expect maybe more snaps going Jonnu Smith's way, and they signed him to a pretty big deal, and they did that for a reason. I think they look to get him involved. They used to run those twin tight end sets back in the day with Tom Brady. I think they're trying to get back to that with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, so I'm liking the over on Jonnu Smith and his receiving yards. All right, we got 3 more games to talk about. We're almost done. Green Bay Packers at New Orleans Saints. The first one that caught my eye was Aaron Jones, and we're looking at his rushing yards today. Now, Aaron Jones obviously had a great year last year and has been a good running back for the last couple of years, but in this particular case, I'm looking to take the under on Aaron Jones. I think we see more of this young fella, A.J. Dillon, get involved here for the Green Bay Packers. This one could turn into a back and forth, pass-happy type of game. In that case, Aaron Jones might struggle to reach 66 or more yards. So I'm looking to take the under, as the Saints were one of the best defensive units last year against the run. Let's go take a look and see how many rushing yards per game they allowed. So if we go over to the rushing category and we sort by rushing yards, we go down to toward the middle or bottom of the league here. Where is New Orleans? Oh, there they are. 76.8 rushing yards per game allowed. So under 100 rushing yards per game allowed. So I do find that this is going to be I think this is going to be a tough one for Aaron Jones to go over his rushing prop if the New Orleans Saints show up looking anything like they did last year. So I'm looking to take the under on Aaron Jones and his rushing yards. Now, another one that we could look at on the other side of things is going to be a New Orleans Saint prop, and that's going to be Marquez Callaway, who's at a pretty reasonable number here for 45.5 receiving yards. Kind of like Mecole Hardman, like we talked about with him. One big play out of this kid, and he's going well over 45.5 receiving yards. Of course, Michael Thomas is out. I do believe Traquan Smith has been ruled out for this game, but correct me if I'm wrong. But Marquez Callaway should see plenty of targets and should see plenty of opportunities to go over this 45.5 receiving number, especially if Green Bay builds a lead and the Saints find themselves passing the ball more than they normally would. I could see Callaway going over 45.5 receiving yards. All right, the other one that I wanted to mention, I won't go find it and click on it because that takes too much time, but Randall Cobb, under 3.5 receptions. He's back on the team now in case you've been living under a rock. Randall Cobb is now a Green Bay Packer once again. His under on 3.5 receptions look like a good way to go. I could see him going for about 3 receptions in this case. The next game is the Denver Broncos at the New York Giants. The first prop that caught my eye was Mr. Williams for the Denver Broncos and his rushing yards. It seemed entirely too low. Of course, Melvin Gordon is still around, and he's up there at 49.5 rushing yards. Not really interested in that one, but Javonte Williams at 34.5 rushing yards. Depends on how many carries he's going to get. It's another young guy. Like I said, an overarching theme of this video, you're going to see a lot of rookies, a lot of young guys here that I'm looking to take the overs on. They could come in, make a quick splash, or they could come in and do absolutely nothing. It's week 1. Anything, truly anything can happen. But I am liking Javonte Williams based on some of the projections and numbers that I saw earlier in the day, so that could be an overplay for you. Another one that kind of caught my eye was on the New York Giants side of things, and we're going to passing yards, and we're talking about Daniel Jones. Obviously, Saquon Barkley coming off a pretty major injury. He was kind of a question mark if he was going to be ready for week 1 or not. He is going to be ready for week 1, but do I expect them to give him a full workload? I do not. So I think more Daniel Jones is in store for everybody. And at 216.5 passing yards in this type of NFL that we live in, where it's a pass-happy league, I think Daniel Jones could get at least 217 passing yards, especially with all the weapons that he's got around him. Of course, Evan Ingram will be out, but they did sign Kyle Rudolph, so they've got a pretty solid tight end option. Of course, Kenny Galladay, I expect him to be good to go with that hamstring he's been dealing with. And they've got a plethora of returning weapons. So I do think Daniel Jones can find himself in a pass-first situation with Saquon Barkley still on the mend. Let's go take a look at the Denver Broncos and see how many passing yards they allowed per game to opposing quarterbacks. You're looking at 253 passing yards per game to opposing quarterbacks last season. That kind of puts them around middle of the pack. So you could see that there is a margin here, a bit of a upside here for Daniel Jones to go over 216.5. So I don't hate that one whatsoever. The other one I wanted to mention, Noah Fant over 3.5 receptions. I could see him easily snagging 4 or more. The only problem is Denver has a lot of mouths to feed on that offense. Jerry Jeudy, you've got KJ Hamler, you've got Cortland Sutton, lots and lots of options there. So be careful with that one, but that one did kind of stick out to me. Which brings us to our final game. I try to get through these as quickly as humanly possible. We've got the Chicago Bears at the Los Angeles Rams. Let's talk about A.J. Dalton. How about Andy Dalton at 209.5 passing yards? 209.5 passing yards, again, for an NFL quarterback, one that has a plethora of weapons around him and will probably have a hard time moving the ball on the ground against this Los Angeles Rams front four. I could see Andy Dalton being forced into a more pass-friendly script here. So let's take a look and see how many passing yards per game the Rams allowed. Just 212.6, not a whole lot, but Andy Dalton is a veteran. He is a capable quarterback. So, it would be very surprising if he didn't get at least 210 or more yards, especially if they fall behind to what could be a very high-powered offense with the Los Angeles Rams and Matt Stafford under center. So the other one that I liked too was Andy Dalton over 18.5 pass completions. Now on the other side of things, the Rams passing game looks pretty good here, namely Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. Both of those guys projected pretty similarly when it comes to receiving yards and receptions, but I think I'm leaning more toward Cooper Kupp in this particular case here for 64 or more receiving yards. He covered this number more than Robert Woods did, slightly more than Robert Woods did last season. So I'm liking the over on Cooper Kupp in this one. But if you like Robert Woods a little bit more, hey, I don't mind that one either. But that's going to do it for today's video. I tried to get through all of these games for Sunday's NFL slate as quickly as possible, giving you some of my favorite prop plays that I found thanks to Derek Carty's The Blitz. Definitely go check out The Blitz. Check out PrizePicks. If you're not playing on PrizePicks yet, use promo code Curry to sign up. Get that 100% instant deposit match and get your first month of Patreon for free when you sign up with Patreon. I will reimburse that to you. Thank you so much for watching. Thumbs up, subscribe, notifications, share this video with the entire world. And good luck in week 1, guys. Catch you in the next one. Peace.